Hi, and welcome to the Emotionally Challenged podcast. This show is for anyone who at some point in their lives has struggled to manage their emotions. So if you've ever let your emotions get the best of you, if you've spiraled to the sunken place at the slightest trigger, or maybe you just want to ride the self-help train, then this podcast is for you. We'll be laughing and learning our way to a better understanding of what our emotions tell us, how they influence us, and most importantly, how we can use them to change our lives. Join in the discussion by sharing your comments and thoughts. And if you're interested in having a free, anonymous coaching session with me here on the show, you can contact me directly at hello@NikoleSeals.com, and that's Nikole with a K. Be sure to subscribe to the show and rate your favorite episode on iTunes, Podcast Addict, or Stitcher Radio. To learn more, visit my website, NikoleSeals.com, for access to articles, videos, self-help programs, and more. You can also follow me on Instagram at MyInnerTherapist or subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll find all of my links in the show's description section. All right, enough with the intro. Let's get emotional. Hello and welcome. I am your host and empowerment coach, Nikole Seals, and I want to thank you for joining me for episode 6. We are going to be talking about survival mode, and the question at hand is, are you stuck in survival mode? Perhaps you're aware of it, maybe you're unaware of it, maybe you just feel like you've been living a Groundhog's Day every day for the past few years. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and get a clearer idea of what survival mode is. And I'm going to start off by just sharing a professional story with you. So I had a client I had just started working with. We were only a few sessions into our coaching, and she had shared with me, she really opened up and shared with me her past history in her marriage. And she's divorced in present day. She did reflect on the abusive nature of her marriage and what that did to her self-worth and her confidence, and it really was feeding into her inability to love herself and to trust. So she was able to get herself out of that relationship, and she really just focused on managing life because she had been financially dependent on her husband, and now she was a single mother taking care of her one daughter. So she really got in this place of where she was working and she was providing what she could for her child, and she was focused on not getting herself back into another situation like that, not getting into another abusive relationship. And so one of the things I talked to her about is, how she kind of identified herself and how she identified from that experience. And she's, I'm a survivor. And I agreed with her, and I was like, absolutely. It sounds like you survived your own personal trauma in your relationship, and then trauma, the loss of the relationship. And I said, what comes after survival? And she really just kind of sat there, not quite sure what I was asking her. And that led us to have this discussion where we were talking about survival mode. And you hear about people who are survivors. You have people who are survivors of trauma, people who are survivors of abuse, people who are survivors of domestic violence, people who are survivors of a natural disaster. What I was suggesting and what I was talking to her about is being a survivor is not a new personality that you take on. It's not a new life that you take ownership of. It's not any place that you set up shop and stay. Survival is a phase. Survival is a phase that gets you to the next phase. And in all honesty, she took a little bit of offense to this. She was upset because she really had she really had taken on, like I said, the persona of a survivor, and that was who she was. And that's who she'd been for years. She really didn't know any different. And so for me to challenge that made her challenge who she had become and how she had been living. And that upsets people. Trust me. I know it's not the first time I've had that reaction, but my job as a coach is to help you see things from a different perspective, right? You've come to me because the current way of thinking is no longer working. And that's why she showed up. And so we were able to move through it. And what we were able to talk about is what I want to talk about with you today, that survival mode is temporary. Survival mode is a phase. And we all go through it, and we should, and it does. It makes us stronger, and it leads us to a place of growth. But what survival mode does, and we have to focus on, is when we're in survival mode, and let's talk about what that actually means. Survival mode is when our thinking lives in the part of the brain that is responsible for fight or flight. And we all know what the fight or flight syndrome is, right? And this takes place in our amygdala, that part of our brain that really is about survival and protection and fear and safety. And it's the oldest part of our brain, right? This was early man, and they had a completely different environment that they were living in, where they had to be aware and they had to stay alert. We live in a very different time and age, and so our brain has developed and evolved as a result of it, but we still have that part of our brain that responds to fear and responds to needing to protect ourselves. And that's our survival mode. And what we've done is we have associated it with security and safety. We've associated it with all I know. We've associated it with the place that I need to stay because I need to be on alert. And I need to stay in fight mode, and I need to be ready. And I want to talk to you about what the problem is with that and why living in survival mode, what it does is it stifles your ability to growth. It handicaps your ability to grow. And the first way that it does that is when you're in survival mode, it keeps you stuck in your old patterns. So it keeps you stuck in your old pattern of thinking, it keeps you stuck in your old pattern of behaving, and it keeps you stuck in your old pattern of decision making. And in the example of working with my client, she was engaging in the same behaviors over and over and over again. And a lot of them were fear-based. A lot of those decisions she was making was because of her fear and because of her past experience that she had. She had not allowed herself to move on to have a new relationship because she had some deeply rooted trust issues. She was constantly in the I have to fight to defend myself mode because I'm never going to let that happen to me again. So many of the relationships that came into her life were sabotaged immediately as a result of that. And what ends up happening is she's created this survival mode that is holding on to all of the experiences and the emotions associated with those experiences that she fought so hard to escape, that she did so much to try to pull herself out of and get out of. And she's actually, like I said, set up shop there. She's living there. And so my work with her was about how to get out of that. So some of the other things that comes up when we talk about being stuck in survival mode is that when you are in that place, in that space, you are also attracting more of the same. So as we hold on to these old patterns and beliefs, what we end up doing is we end up drawing more of that into our experience. How's the saying go? Is where your attention goes, energy flows. What you hold in your focus, where your thoughts focus, that is where your energy goes. And as a result, we end up pulling in more experiences to match that, to match whatever we're focusing on. So if you're holding on to a past abusive situation and you've got that in the forefront of your mind, you're constantly thinking, I need to stay alert. I need to look for all these signs. I need to be on the alert for this guy. Well, you're going to find him Like, believe me, that same guy is going to show up in a different physical shell, a different body, and give you the same experience. And you may see this example when we talk about, and I'm using someone being in an abusive relationship as an example, but it is not limited to that. But any relationship, say you're in a relationship where you just feel like you've been dating the same guy for the past 10 years. Well, a lot of that is because we hold focus on that past experience. And so we continue to attract same guy, different version into our lives. We do that with jobs. We do that with drama. You know those people in your lives where you're like, they're just drawn to drama. They attract drama. That's because they hold drama as their focus. They talk about it. They're heated about it. They get worked up about it. They energize themselves about it. And so they attract more of it. That's another way that we keep ourselves stuck in survival mode. And that's one of the really negative side effects of living there. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is when we're in survival mode, what that does to our perception. Because what it does is it puts a filter on all of the experiences that show up. We've got a survivor filter. And that survivor filter influences our perceptions. So if I'm coming from let's switch it up because I don't want to just focus on abusive relationships. Let's say I am coming off the trauma of having experienced a life-threatening illness and I'm now in recovery. But I'm also really hyper aware of my fear of getting sick again. So I'm super focused on all the things that I shouldn't be doing and that can trigger it and that can make me more sick. And so what I see in the world as I'm looking out, what my perception is on all the possible things that can get me sick again, on all the things that are harmful or a threat to me. And when we do that, unfortunately, that causes us to live in a place of where we pull in more of those same experiences, or we isolate and we shut down. We cut off ourselves from our learning brain, right? The brain that's out there looking for new experiences and new information. And we allow the feelings and emotions associated with survival, with trying to survive from a past trauma or trying to survive from chronic stress. We hold on to all of those emotions that we associate with that, right? Like our fear, we get very fear driven and we live in a place of being worried and anxious and scared. And it's that, if you've ever had that feeling where you're just kind of, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, you're like, I can just tell like things aren't, like something's about to go down. I can just sense it. Something is about to go down. And that's not like your spidey sense kicking in. Like that's just your brain working. Your brain is searching for that thing to go down too. And your brain is very good at attracting those experiences and drawing those experiences into your life. So we've talked a little bit about what survival mode is and how it keeps us there. And what this does is it puts us in a continuous state of just kind of looking around the corner and always trying to predict the future. And, I'll share with you my own personal experience with this because this was a challenge for me to overcome. And that's with growing up, my mom experienced all kind of health problems. And I don't really remember, it's hard for me to remember a time where she was really physically healthy and active. What I remember most is her being in and out of the hospital. And there were numerous times that I would be called and told, Mom's in the hospital and she's, this has happened and it's not looking good. And then I go racing to the hospital and this was like just chronic and repeated occurrence in my life. And so I got into the survival mode and I was always waiting for that phone call. I was always looking for the signs of here we go again, like something's about to, my mom's not taking care of herself. So a hospitalization is right around the corner. Or And then family members, we all were stuck in that survival place. So we just incited it. Like when we got together, we all came together and joined in. We had a survival seance. Like we just, that energy, the energy of a group all sharing the same experience and the same emotion became really powerful. And so we fed off of each other, and it just made our fear even stronger. And that became the place where I lived for years and years. And that was a trigger for me. And it took a lot of work to break that old pattern of thinking. It took a lot of work to move myself from survival mode to thriving, to being in a place where there was growth, where I was open to new information and into a new way of thinking, and to associate new experiences with new emotions and feelings, and to let go of the old ones that were really no longer serving me. And I'm not going to pretend that that doesn't take work, but I am going to tell you that it is possible. So the message here is that it is so important. Survival is so important. It is an innate part of who we are. It is in our DNA. What we want to refrain from is living there. Survival mode was not meant to be a place where we live. It has an enormous impact on our physical health when we stay in survival mode, because the stress that we experience there and have the feelings of anxiety and constantly worrying and being scared, that increases the level of cortisol in our blood. And cortisol wreaks havoc on our body. It causes damage to our immune system. It shuts down certain parts of the brain where we do learn and where we are able to grow. And so that's why it's really important that you make that shift. If you find yourself living in survival mode, it's really important that you do the work to make that shift. And I want to end it by asking you to do a little self-assessment right now. And I just want you, as this show ends, I just want you to ask yourself a few questions. And this will help you to really kind of tap into whether or not you might be stuck in survival mode, or what you need to be looking for to recognize if you go in and out of that mode. And I want you to ask yourself if do you find yourself being a what-ifer? Are you, and a what-ifer is, I use it's just a common term in my world, but what-ifers is when you are constantly what-ifing someone, where your thoughts always start off, well, what if? What if this? And what if that? And that really does come from a place of either creativity or anxiety. But if you are in survival mode, chances are that it's coming from a place of fear and anxiety. So are you constantly what-ifing the things in your life? Are you trying to see and predict the future? Are you thinking, oh God, yeah, this is going to go bad. This is exactly what happens. This is what she does. I'm going to show up there and she's going to lay into me, because that's what we do. So are you predicting the future in that way? Are you playing out arguments in your head that you haven't even had, that are just based on past memories and past experiences? Do you often reflect on painful past memories, on trauma that you've gone through? And do you hold that? And when I say hold that, do you hold the emotion of that? Do you think about it and start to feel bad and scared and worried and small, and then go through your day feeling that same way, never letting that go, never processing or expressing those emotions and allowing yourself to let them go? Because holding on to that is another way that we keep ourselves rooted into survival mode. And another really strong indicator, and something common that we all do, is do you engage in negative self-talk? Do you find yourself just, your inner critics just on a loop, just constantly talking to you in a negative tone, and in a critical voice? Do you go through your days feeling like your circumstances are never going to change, that every day it's the same old thing? Or Do you go through your life refusing to acknowledge that you've been through a trauma, that you've experienced trauma? And trauma doesn't mean that you've had to been in a horrible car accident or a natural disaster. Trauma can happen on all levels. I'll tell you that I was out the other day with a friend at a park, beautiful park, having a wonderful walk, fantastic time. And we witnessed a dog getting hit by a car. That was traumatic. It was traumatic. And so when I say, do you refuse to acknowledge when trauma has occurred in your life, I want you to ask yourself on all levels. Is it on a level where you witnessed something that was really painful? Or is it on a level where you were victimized and you were harmed or you were threatened or you experienced violence? And if you were refusing to acknowledge that, how is that refusal showing up in your life? Because it is showing up in your life and it's manifesting in some way. And it may be manifesting in the way to where you are just stuck. You are just stuck and trying to survive day to day. So give that some thought. Think about it. If you have any questions, if you have some concerns about what's come up for you, you can always reach out to me. I prefer direct emails because that way they're private and I can respond to you and I can see if there's something I can do to help you. And if not, then I can point you in the right direction. So you can email me at hello@NikoleSeals.com. And by the way, links to all of my social media are in the description of the podcast. So be sure to go to the description so that you can find the links and you can be able to access me, whether it's on Instagram or emailing me or getting my newsletter. Okay, so be sure to check that out and be kind to yourself. Have this little conversation with yourself and do the self-assessment so that you can get yourself out of survival mode if you've been there and you're stuck. Okay? Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. And as always, I will end it with this helpful bit of advice. Don't listen to your inner critic because she's got a bad attitude. Until next time, friends.